And welcome back to the Remedial Film Class Podcast. I'm your host, Dan, along with...
Travis.
And George.
And poor George. He's never seen any movies. Hey, George. Have you ever seen the movie Psycho?
I have not. In fact, I didn't know Psycho was a movie. And we were talking about this Hitchcock guy, and could you believe I couldn't even tell you what else this Hitchcock guy has done. So I'm a case, guys.
That's
why
my
we're
soul,
here,
George.
That's why we're here, right?
We're here to fix you and hopefully entertain anyone that wants to spend their time listening to you get fixed live.
Can you hear me shaking my head? I'm shaking my head. This Hitchcock guy.
Yeah,
this Hitchcock guy gonna fix George.
I have heard the name. Couldn't tell you what he's done.
Well, we're not going to tell you either because we don't want to affect your expectations.
Okay.
But let me ask you, George. What do you expect going into a movie called Psycho that was released in 1960?
Well, people have always been. It could be very deep and very, like, the opposite of physical, mental. Or it could be like a straight up, like massacre. I don't know. If it is a massacre, the special effects are going to be terrible. But that's okay. I can look past that. I really don't know. I have no idea what to expect.
This might be a little bit of radio magic then, because I think you might be the last person on this planet that hasn't seen this movie.
It's quite possible.
Your sister probably hasn't seen this movie.
Well, it's because she's from the same family. And that's the reason why I'm here.
Well, unlike Back to the Future, I have no problems with Psycho. It's not one I'm going to argue about. It's a good movie. I'm glad to defend it to all comers. So instead of making you look forward to my destruction of its plot like Back to the Future, no, instead, I'm just going to have you look forward to a fantastic story of the last time I showed this movie to someone who had never seen it before. I will save that for after you've seen the movie.
Very good.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get to it.
All right, George, let's get to work. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's in black and white. So adjust your modern film viewers. Yeah, I know. You youngins used to your color and your 3Ds and your 4Ks and your HDs. Just go with it, man. Let it create the ambiance it's going for. Don't just look at it like my kids do and say it's boring.
No, I know how to appreciate shit. I'm good.
We'll see.
I showed him the original Kong, so he knows black and white.
Yeah. I'm good.
All right. Well, let's get after it, and folks, we'll see you after the movie. Welcome back to the Remedial Film Class Podcast. So this week, George, we really upped the volume, literally and figuratively.
Sure did.
And we jumped from Back to the Future over to Psycho. How you feeling, man?
Good. I mean, yeah, real good. Just got finished watching it like half an hour ago. Okay, for me, it was pretty straightforward. Okay. Obviously, it's a classic. I did, look up who Alfred Hitchcock is, so.
Oh, good.
I had a little bit of background. No, but yeah, it was pretty straightforward. And it's a very old movie, and I liked it. I can say that much. It was, worth watching, and I'm sure that I'll see, some of this stuff again in other movies and say, I see where that came from.
Right.
But but yeah, I know that Dan is super excited to do this movie, so I'm just gonna let him school me because that's why we're here, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, I would say, and you'd have to consult with a real expert instead of a pretend one on the radio, but I would put Psycho in probably the top 5 most influential films in history. I mean, there are very few films that actually create a genre
Right.
within the framework of a single movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can put it along the lines of, like, I always think of the movies I've seen and all the directors that I love, they were all influenced by the Hitchcock generation. So it's, we don't have Jaws without Hitchcock. We don't have Halloween without Hitchcock. We don't have, like, all these great directors from my childhood and a little earlier. They've all been influenced by this movie. So that's kind of, to me, the way I look at it. Yes, it's a straightforward movie. I love it, but to me, it's not in my top 10, but I see why it is, because, like you said, it's so influential, and we don't get half of the movies that we have without that film. I'll go by my personal favorite part of this movie, other than the subtle character development. I love the scenery. I love the motel. It feels like even the house is a character in the movie. I fell in love with that house. God, 35 years ago. That, to me, I wanted to live in that house. That house was it. That was horror. And it's amazing to me that an inanimate object could become such a character in a movie, but it just sets the tone. That whole gritty motel, and even the motel itself kind of sets you up for what you're about to see, but then you see the house and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, the house was eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was almost like, it was like a silhouette against, like the stormy sky. It was like,
yeah.
And it's cliche now, but
right.
But then it was probably revolutionary. Or
yeah, it was just like so many iconic pictures and posters and whatever of Norman standing on the steps, and just that house. It could be a silhouette with one window lit up. It could be daylight. It could be nighttime. Whatever it is, that house did it for me. Yeah. And then as I got older, the characters did it for me, and then Norman Bates and where he falls into the genre, where he is, what he brought us. That's all great for someone in their 20s and 30s to discuss. But for me, I just fell in love, and I've never been to the original house. I've been to Universal Studios in Florida when they had it, and that house, just standing there, I remember I was trying to take a picture of it, and a crow flew down and landed right on the Bates Motel sign. I have the picture.
Yeah,
I was like 14.
Yeah.
And
that's the universe.
Yeah,
right
I was
there.
just like, there's a crow just landed on the Bates Motel sign with the house in the background. I can die now.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, even to this day, it's popped up in other movies because it's on the back lot.
Yeah.
But it was in a few of my other favorite movies because it kind of falls in that background, and or the movie The Burbs, like it just pops up.
Sure.
And I love it.
Sure.
I love that scene when the private detective guy walks into the house and the stuffed birds are like, wings out in the attack formation, like looking down at him, and that owl's ready to like claw his eyes out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the house itself. Yeah, you're right. It's not only like the setting; it is also like this threatening character that they all have to deal with at one time or another, and it's so well executed. It's probably it's like the earliest example I can think of where you bridge like the universal, like, Dracula type castle into just a cold modern setting.
Yes. I was just about to say, it felt like when you watch the old Bela Lugosi Dracula and they pull up in front of that castle and you just see Dracula's castle in the background, and you're just like, wow, like that house is the American version of Dracula's castle, and everybody knows it. It's iconic. Yeah. It's as iconic as the shower scene or the, that wee, 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 wee sound. Mm-hmm. Like you hear that, you know what it is, you know what it's from. End of story. There's no denying it.
It's funny because I've heard that sound before. Mm-hmm. Like in used in other things, used in parody, used in whatever. Yep. And like this was the movie that it was like this was the movie that
That's
it was
where it was
used in.
born.
That's where it came from. It was kind of weird, cool.
It's crazy too because the shower scene itself comes from the movie. It becomes iconic. It's like a pop culture phenomenon, still referenced today on modern media. The music itself sets up an entire scoring pattern for this type of movie for the next 30 years until the slasher kind of fades in the early 90s. But the Manfredini scores for the Friday the 13th movies you'll eventually see all of multiple times. They're psycho. That's all. Sometimes Friday the 13th theme comes up on my playlist. I have to think, is this Psycho or is this Friday the 13th, because it's such a direct copy.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed the way movies were scored going forward. Like I said, hugely influential. You also have to keep in mind too, it comes out in 1960, so you're at like the gateway of the 60s, and now you've got this ratcheting up of violence, unlike anything to that point in any American released film. Oddly, a lot of critics will point out that Michael Powell's Peeping Tom comes out the same year, also an escalation of violence. Both older directors, which I think is interesting. Both guys are like in their 60s or pushing it when they start really upping the violence. You really expect that out of younger filmmakers, and in the 70s it becomes like a younger filmmaker domain. But here the old stalwarts are here, and it worked out great for Hitchcock and ruined Powell's career, but just strange that they happened almost simultaneously. Opened a new door and shut the old door, and now it's the 60s and things are going to get crazy, and here we are. And
you knew right away because the main character, the female, was not the typical, Donna Reed type character. Like, she was kind of having a side relationship with this guy, and she's like meeting him at a hotel, but she had her own life going on, and then she was trying to see how he felt. Like, he was kind of playing a game. There was a big game between them two, and then they show her in her life. She wasn't very ethical for that time period.
I read it more like she was kind of just stuck in a rut, wasn't getting a lot of opportunities, and was getting desperate. And then when future politician oil guy walks in with his $40,000, which I did the inflation thing. That's $350,000 in modern dollars.
Wow.
And that is still kind of the perfect amount if you were going to break away and start a new life, right? You could buy a decent house. You could buy a nice house in a lot of cities, but at least a decent house and start over fresh for $350,000 these days. So, I mean, it puts into scale that $40,000 was maybe worth running away with. I don't know. Yeah. Didn't turn out so well for her, but
no. Well, I think if they would have established that she had maybe some debt, or I know it was the whole she just wanted to start her life over again. But to me, that's a lot of money to steal. That's going from.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's got to be a lot of money. It's got to be a lot of money for the story. I kind of thought when she was, when he's flashing the money in front of her, and she really wasn't, she wasn't flirting back, and all that. I was kind of thinking the same thing that you were thinking, Dan. Like, she's over this. Yeah. Like, she, either that, or she's trying to be like a man, or she's trying to be a woman in a man's world, kind of thing. But
there's not much opportunity at that time. 60s. There's not many opportunities.
Yeah, and you have the other girl sitting across from her, like, I don't know, ogling over it, like, it's like, come on, act like you've been in there before,
The line where she says, "Oh, he must have noticed my wedding ring. That's why he wasn't flirting with me."
You're right.
Oh, that's some good
that's
writing
it
right there.
It's like,
so, another
You're
thing
not
from
Janet
that
Leigh.
From that general thing, the way she lets that highway patrolman have it during the traffic stop, it's like nowadays in a more sensitive body cam, cell phone cam, world that we live in, I just, it was shocking and also kind of hilarious to see her letting that California highway patrolman just didn't give him an inch and tried to drive off during the stop. And
she didn't do the obvious, which would be the other aspect. Like, is she going to show a little bit more cleavage? Is she going to be like, she went the opposite way?
Yeah.
She went, listen,
Again,
dude,
yeah.
I'm doing this and get out of my life kind of thing, instead of like trying to, play the
She
damsel.
was a strong,
Yeah.
independent woman, didn't need no man,
Which is good.
she was the whole time. I don't know if I should really say this, but the verbiage hasn't changed in since 1960. Am I free to go?
Right.
That's
Are
still
you
what
detaining
that's
me?
still what you say. Am I free to go?
Am I free to go? Are you arresting me
So anyway,
for sleeping?
I thought the whole movie was a lesson in karma because you don't steal $40,000 because that's what might happen to you because karma.
Yeah, and trusting like that wholesome kind of guy where it's like, oh, he seems harmless, but you don't know what's going on in anybody's head.
Well, she didn't really trust him. She didn't really trust him
She
either.
let him in a little bit.
A little bit,
Yeah.
but
Just enough.
she was taking a shower. She didn't,
Yeah, and they establish early that he's kind of smarmy, but in like a childish kind of way, a childlike kind of way, like almost like George McFly. Just kind of, he's got the hole in the wall and he's checking her out, but
Oh my gosh, he is like George McFly.
He's got like an overgrown adolescent quality.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then that kind of fades away a little bit. So we get to the shower scene, maybe the most iconic murder in film history.
It's up there.
I don't think that's a stretch to say that.
No.
And so, George, what do you think when they go and they kill your main character?
What am I thinking? I'm thinking it was pretty well into the movie, so I was thinking, well, it can't be the first of many, like, where this person goes on like a spree. And I'm thinking it's too early to be the end. So I really didn't know what to make of it. It's funny because I said that last week. Oh yeah, they're not going to kill the main character, but in this case they did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was definitely thrown off by it.
It sounds like it still works then.
Yeah, sure does.
That's amazing.
Well, it puts you in that mindset that anything's possible, because here's a person they established, took the time to establish, and then boom, they're gone. But then it kind of plays in the fact that it's going to be not a murder mystery movie, but it's going to unfold. So her dying midway through, or a little bit before that, it sets you up for, okay, where are they going with this? How deep is he going to go? And
right.
Then, you know what I mean?
Right, and I thought it was really far into the movie for him to get very deep. For the killer to get very deep. There's only an hour left in this movie. Like, how far can he go? How are they going to wrap this up? It was a surprise, for sure, that it happened that quick.
Now, one thing, I don't know if you know this, George, because this is probably the first Hitchcock you've seen. He was shooting in color prior to this, and he shot in color again after. So him switching to black and white for this movie was just more of that kind of rock and roll attitude of his 60-year-old self. Like, I don't know where it came from, but it helps keep the budget under control, and you get a little bit more flexibility, so you get to do stuff like kill your main character. But it's just I was hoping you could get the context of this. Like, this movie is an aberration in a lot of ways in his already very well established filmography.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately he goes back to shooting color and making mainstream thrillers through the end of his career. So
Interesting.
just kind of a strange rock and roll attitude there at the beginning of the 60s.
Now, Dan, what is your take on this shower scene? I'm curious.
It's something I've seen. I of course saw it in other things first. The Simpsons notably do a very good one. Chevy Chase in Vacation does an excellent parody version. Better in the R-rated cut than the TV cut, but whatever. It's like it's the game changer, right? It's a good non-reveal of the killer. Like, in modern parlance, we'd probably notice how darkly lit the face is and start to wonder, is that really Mother or is that him? Like, what are we doing here? But for the time, that you get enough of the killer to be scary. It kind of confirms what they've been, like, the BS they've been pushing at you about Mother. So you're like, oh, it is her and she is alive, and here she, but it's so violent and just it's precise and
it's shot from above. When he comes in the room, even with the investigator, they shoot it purposely so you can't really tell body structure and all that stuff. So they leave that open to interpretation. And if you're good, then you figured it out very early.
I didn't figure it out.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. No, I had no idea.
Yeah, I love the shower scene. To me, it's that same mentality that Spielberg uses in Jaws, where it's like it's not always what you see, it's what you don't see. It's cut and edited, it makes it more violent, and they don't really even show hardly any blood other than in the water. And there's no penetration of the knife.
It's actually a realistic amount of blood.
Right.
Which is not...
It's not a lot.
It's not normal to see that in a movie. It's like exaggerated in movies. It was actually...
Well, yeah, it was way before gore.
Yeah.
But it's like they never show the knife go in to her body.
Right.
But it's just so well shot, and it just kind of adds to the horror of the scene, because it's her reaction, and they just show enough of Mother, in quotes, to you're not really paying attention to see who the killer is. You kind of think you know.
Here's how clueless I was. The whole scene had taken place, and at the last second, as the killer's leaving, I'm like, did he just put on her nightgown and leave? Like, I was like, or was that a woman? What? Like, I didn't even register, like, if it was a man or a woman or who it was, until the very end of the scene, and I was like, "But was that a women's nightgown? What was I just watching?"
And then the pull away, the slow pull away of her eye, from her eye.
Yeah,
like she sat like that for I don't know if you've ever counted it, Dan, but it's got to be at least close to a minute. That pullback. And she doesn't twitch, she doesn't blink, she doesn't do anything, and you can tell that it
seems like an eternity.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, and everybody talks about the Psycho theme and the re dissonant chords and all that, and it's super effective. But the sound design of the actual impacts of the knife blade in an era where you're not seeing the violence, it's a whole different level of horror, because it's just you've done that thing where your brain is drawing the part you can't see, and it looks worse than it would if they actually showed you. And it's being reinforced by this horrifying, knife into melon sound or whatever they're using. And it's too effective. Now, we touched a little bit on the big reveal. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen the movie except for George. Mother is long dead, and Tony P is our slasher in chief.
When he comes into the house and she's trying to hide, and she goes down the steps, and I'm thinking, she's gonna run into Mother, and then she goes up the steps like she's gonna get out the door while he's upstairs, and I'm like, oh no, what? That didn't. And then she sees the door, and I'm like, yeah, go down the door, okay. Like let's see what Mother's all about.
I was here for that reaction. I enjoyed it, 'cause I wasn't sure if he liked it or not, and I'm like trying to hear his reactions. And when she kind of dipped down into the stairwell, he's like, yeah.
Yeah,
he like whispered, yes. And then when she turned to come up the steps, he's like, no.
What are you doing?
What?
And you're supposed to go down the steps.
Yes.
So
he was cheering her on to go meet Mother, which to me, that was enough for me to realize I wasn't sure if he loved the movie, but at least he was feeling the movie.
I don't know. When Mother was just sitting there, and she didn't turn around when the door opened, and stuff like that. There were some hints as to the fact that she wasn't, really there. And when they turned her around and you see that, I'm like, okay, that doesn't surprise me. And because Norman has been off the entire time, it surprised me, but it didn't. Like, I'm like, okay, that's how he is. Okay, It was a great scene. What's even better is what followed. And that reveal was, oh my God. I was like, what is going on? And then, obviously they explain that
they mansplain
he has, more than one personality, and this, that, and the other thing, and okay, that's cool. But when he came in,
shrieking and running with the knife, yeah,
Was that
in
that
the
grin?
in the wig and the gown and the, I was like, what is okay, all right, okay.
Now, did seeing her as a mummy or a mummified mummy, a mummy, seeing her like that, did that ruin the reveal, the visual of seeing Norman dressed as her? Okay, that's good.
Nope.
Because I that was my fear. I was like, okay, because when I watched it, I knew everything that was going to happen, so I was kind of watching it with a different eye.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw her spin, when she tapped her shoulder, I was like, man, she looks so inanimate that George is going to figure out that she's dead before she spins.
I did.
So when she spins and then you notice that she's mummified, they've been telling you this the whole movie because he's been a taxiderm. That's been his hobby, is taxidermy.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been kind of revealing that to you the whole time and just hoping that you wouldn't figure it out. And then when they show her, she looked so dead that I was afraid that would ruin the reveal of Norman coming in, which it didn't. But I was just thinking, does she look too fake for today's standards? Like, how's George going to handle this?
Well, I mean, I'm considering the time too,
right?
But yeah, I mean, the sheriff said that she had been dead for 10 years, so I expected her to not look great.
So Travis, you got to be there during the big reveal scene, then. So you got to witness George seeing the big unveiling. Is that how I understand this?
Yeah, I was here when I showed up. They were in the shower discussing going to the house to talk to the mother. So I kind of just crept in and I kind of sat on the floor. I didn't say anything. And then when the movie was over, I was like, don't say a word.
And I was on the edge of the couch, by the way, like really watching.
So years ago, I mentioned this earlier, I showed this movie to my sister-in-law, who doesn't do well with scary movies. And so the reveal happens. They spin around the mother. Norman bursts through the door screaming. And before he even finishes his first step, she jumps from the couch, grabs a pillow, and begins smacking me in the face, yelling in perfect cadence, "I will never forgive you for this."
That's funny.
So it sounds like it went better for you, George, than poor Amelia.
Well, I mean, I knew what I was in for.
Well, so
I
did
loved
she.
it. I loved it.
Towards the end, the very end, like you said, when after Norman is taken into custody, then they reveal what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
What was your take on the psychiatrist talking? Like, I was watching it like, man, I really wish they would have taken an extra half hour and showed me some of that. Like, it just seemed like he was wrapping it up in a tiny little bow, and I was just like, man, that's why I love movies today where they do the flashback or they do the the character. What's the word? I don't want to say they want to show full background, but that's why I was glad I saw the TV show Bates Motel, because it kind of shows you everything that doctor was talking about, and you get to see the growth, how Norman goes from a 12-year-old kid to a young adult, and how he gets to that point and how important his mother is, and they show you all that. So to me, I enjoyed that show a lot because it took what that doctor talked about and showed it to me.
Oh, by the way, I've seen a couple of episodes of Bates Motel.
Okay.
I had no idea that Psycho was Bates Motel. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Never connected it. But you know what? I saw a couple of episodes of Bates Motel and I didn't stick with it. But I think it's because I've never seen Psycho.
Yeah. Go watch it again.
Because now I think if I started Bates Motel, I'd be hooked.
Well, and you should also be aware, George, for extra credit, there are 2 slightly non-canonical sequels with Anthony Perkins, one of which was actually directed by Anthony Perkins, and it is bizarre. That's Psycho 2 and 3. Quentin Tarantino says 2 is better than 1. He's wrong. But it is pretty good. But then Psycho 4, the beginning, actually goes through exactly what you were looking for, Travis, which is the mother-son stuff. in the background, and Olivia Hussey is the mom. So I mean, it's not very good. But
Right.
if you've got 3.5, 4 hours to kill, you could probably fast forward through like 30 minutes of each of the last two and still get the full story.
Back to the psychiatrist and wrapping it all in a cute little bow at the end, and you wish you could have seen more of the split personality. I don't know why, but whenever I'm watching an older movie, I expect less from it. Like, not as good acting, not as good effects, not as good a lot of stuff. What I'm finding out is that the scores are fantastic, but I expect less. I don't know why. It just, so when he's wrapping it up and whatever, blah, 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 I did get that feeling like, oh, this is really convenient. Like, okay, cut to the chase. And then they give you the slightest, like a small taste, like 10 seconds or 15 seconds of him not acting like mom, but thinking.
Right.
It's mom's brain thinking.
It's the best part of the movie. Those last 30 seconds are so good.
Yeah, and to say, like, I get why you would say you want more of that, but that was, I think, just the perfect amount to make you want to pull your hair out, which is exactly what it was meant to do. I thought it was fantastic.
That little grin at the end, and then did you catch the skull that they flash in? Some prints it's harder to tell.
Yeah.
But I guess none of us are watching on VHS anymore, but it used to be hard to tell. Now it's pretty straightforward. But man, that grin he gives at the end is just like, it's like a chef's kiss moment.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's one of those moments where I personally don't like a backstory on my killer. I enjoy not knowing why they do what they do. But with Norman, there's so much there. There's just so much meat.
I loved it.
Yeah, they should really... I could watch that character development all day. And that's why that little taste at the end was like, oh, man, that was it. I wanted to see like an interrogation. I wanted to see... I wanted to see him really sink his teeth into some real meaty lines. But it was just that little subtleness and just talking about the fly. And then
he
that,
doesn't
and then
say
that grin.
a word.
No,
he doesn't say a word. It's all facial expressions and his thoughts. And his thoughts are just so mother.
I like that this one, too. The psychology is pretty clunky, but they do a good job of nuance with the transvestitism thing. Like, you always get that one crotchety guy who's like, oh, he's a transvestite, and the psychologist has to be like, okay, back up.
Yeah, there's
back
different
up, dude.
versions.
Don't be talking about my FBI director that way. We gotta, but you'll see, George, as we continue down this road, and especially into the late 70s, so it's gonna branch off, and you're gonna have like half the movies are nuanced and half the movies are not, and you can very clearly define who has done their research and who simply saw Psycho, noted the transvestite tendency of wearing a woman's outfit, and then didn't bother listening to the rest and just went with the fact that this guy's weird and dresses different than everybody else in the room, and it's just it's not great. It doesn't age well, but this one holds up pretty good.
Yeah.
And then when you think of the characters, like, we'll get into it, like, they address it in many ways in different movies that you know and love, or haven't seen but you will know and love. And then you'll see the actual influence of Norman Bates and being a quote-unquote transvestite in future movies that we watch. And
unfortunately, we can't talk about which movies those are because a lot of them hinge on that as being a spoiler, which in 1960 is great. But by 1992, 30 years of this, man. Like, maybe we find a new twist. Somebody call that Shyamalan guy. We need something new.
Right.
Where's
what if
David
the aliens
Fincher?
were cross-dressers?
Swing away.
That would have been better.
I will say, though, jeez Louise, I rewatched this morning, and certain scenes still give me the tingles on the back of my neck, even though I've seen the thing 20 times, 30 times, 40 times. Still very effective. And so to kind of keep the momentum going, I watched Frenzy, which is like a later Hitchcock, and it is really interesting. And we're never going to cover it on this podcast because it's not up there in the tier. But
Very obscure.
a little extra credit for you, George, and really for Travis if you haven't seen it.
I have not. So
it's
that's
that
good.
moment where Hitchcock is now an old guy. You know, somehow at 60 years old, he's not old. He's pushing, he's rock and roll, he's black and white, he's psycho, he's stabbing, it's cool. But by 1972, the cinematic world has changed, and now he's a 72-year-old man trying to make the same movie as like a 22-year-old Wes Craven.
Okay.
And so he's trying to integrate Wes Craven type Last House on the Left era stuff,
Right.
but still following like the instincts and rules of a person who's been making movies since the 20s. And so certain scenes are way more graphic than they would have been 10 years earlier, but he doesn't have like the vocabulary as a visual storyteller to actually pull it off.
Okay.
Pun intended, if you watch the movie. It's very strange. But we talked about the shower scene and what you don't see. There is a scene that consists of a like freeze frame of a lady's eyes and then a long pullback of the camera that was way more scary than anything else in the movie. It was fantastic.
Okay.
So watch that movie just for the giant camera pullback and the way that they just, it's so good. The rest of the movie, but that part, the vintage Hitchcock moment with the camera pull, just like, it was a 10 out of 10.
I will look into it. You said Frenzy?
Frenzy from 1972.
Okay. I will look that up.
So, George, do you like Psycho?
Absolutely.
Are you good for an ever-increasing amount of violence and horror? Because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
With a few comedies here and there.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Sometimes a horror comedy will be thrown in there, I think.
Ooh.
I'm not talking about Saturday the 14th either.
Oh.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's bad.
So, George.
Yeah.
Coming up next week, we got a little curveball for you.
Okay.
Psycho 2. No, I'm just kidding. Travis, do you want to tell him? Oh, God. Travis, you want to tell him what he's won?
You have won an all-expense-paid trip to Wayne's World.
Okay.
Okay. You have not seen Wayne's World, right? We've established that? You're familiar with it, I'm
familiar
sure.
with it. I couldn't tell you what the plot was, so let's say I haven't seen it yet.
Now, I think we have to decide, do we want George to see some of the skits that the movie's based on, or do we just want him to go right into the movie?
I think the movie's got to stand on its own 2 feet.
Okay.
It's almost better without the context.
Beauteous. Then
Okay.
That's what you'll be doing.
All right.
I'm excited. Hey guys, ask me if I've seen Psycho.
Have you seen Psycho?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Oh, we did that. We made a difference in the world.
We did a thing.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on the Remedial Film Class podcast. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Remedial Film Pod, Facebook.com/Remedial Film Pod, and of course, you can email us at remedialfilmpod@gmail.com. We'll see you back here soon.
Surprised we got through that whole thing without one cock joke.
I was going to make one.
Dude, we did it. I made one jerking off joke, and it was pretty sly.
Yeah, you pulled it off nicely.
Yeah, pulled it off, yeah.